The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou as Ibrahim Traoré stood at his office window, watching the final preparations for what would be one of the most significant diplomatic visits of his presidency. A delegation from a Middle Eastern nation, one of Burkina Faso's new strategic partners in the post-French era, was arriving within hours. The visit represented more than just diplomatic protocol. It symbolized Burkina Faso's pivot toward new alliances, toward partnerships based on mutual respect rather than colonial legacies. Traoré was dressed in his characteristic military uniform, simple and unadorned except for the insignia of his rank. At 37, he remained the youngest head of state in the world, but the responsibilities of leadership had added weight to his bearing, a gravity to his movements that had not been there when he first took power 2 years earlier. The insurgency in the north continued to demand constant attention. The economic restructuring of the mining sector required daily oversight, and the diplomatic isolation imposed by Western powers meant every new partnership had to be carefully cultivated. Mr. President, his chief of protocol, Moussa Kaboré, entered the office with a tablet computer displaying the day's detailed schedule. The delegation's aircraft will land in approximately 3 hours. We have everything prepared according to their specifications: the ceremonial guard, the staterooms, the exhibition hall for the presentation. The presentation, that was the centerpiece of today's visit. Burkina Faso's newly nationalized mining company, SOPAMIB, had prepared an exhibition of the country's mineral wealth: gold, manganese, and most spectacularly, a collection of diamonds recently extracted from deposits in the eastern regions. The diamonds would be formally presented to the visiting delegation as part of the negotiations for a major investment deal that could bring hundreds of millions of dollars into Burkina Faso's economy. "What security arrangements have been finalized?" Traoré asked, turning from the window. Security was always his first concern, not out of paranoia, but from hard-won experience. In the 2 years since he had led the second coup that brought him to power, there had been multiple assassination attempts, plots by foreign powers to destabilize his government, and constant threats from both insurgent groups and those who profited from the old corrupt system. "Presidential Guard has triple coverage on all access points," Kaboré replied, scrolling through the security details. "But the diamonds themselves are currently in the State Vault, with biometric access controls. They'll be moved to the exhibition hall under armed escort 2 hours before the presentation. Minister Ouedraogo will personally oversee the transfer." Minister Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo, the Prime Minister, was one of the few people Traoré trusted completely. A technocrat with an impeccable record, Ouedraogo had been instrumental in implementing the mining nationalization program and had proven his dedication to Burkina Faso's sovereignty through countless difficult decisions. "Good. I want you personally present during the transfer. I know it seems like overkill, but these diamonds represent more than just gemstones. They represent Burkina Faso's commitment to controlling our own resources, to showing that we can manage our mineral wealth professionally and transparently." Traoré paused, then added, "And they represent a significant portion of the investment capital we need to expand SOPAMIB's operations. We cannot afford any problems." Kaboré nodded, understanding the broader context. Since Traoré had begun the aggressive nationalization of foreign-owned mines, international investors had been wary. This Middle Eastern delegation represented a crucial alternative source of capital, investors who were willing to work with Burkina Faso on equitable terms, rather than the exploitative arrangements that had characterized decades of Western mining operations. As Kaboré left to continue preparations, Traoré sat at his desk and reviewed the files on the visiting delegation. The lead dignitary was a royal family member, someone with both ceremonial authority and real economic power. The delegation included mining experts, financial advisors, and interestingly, several security consultants. It was that last detail that gave Traoré pause. Why would a diplomatic delegation need extensive security personnel for a simple state visit? He made a mental note to ensure his own intelligence officers paid close attention to the visitors' movements and interactions. Trust was earned, not given, and in the world of international diplomacy and mining contracts, there were always hidden agendas beneath the surface pleasantries. The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mr. President, Minister of Defense on line 1. He says it's urgent." Traoré picked up the phone. his mind already shifting from diplomatic concerns to security matters. In Burkina Faso, under his leadership, the line between the two was often paper-thin. General Sawadogo, what is it? Sir, we've received intelligence from our northern commands. There's increased insurgent activity near Djibo, and our sources suggest they're planning something significant. I recommend we increase security across Ouagadougou today, given the timing of the diplomatic visit. Traoré's jaw tightened. The timing was suspicious, too convenient to be coincidence. Insurgents ramping up activity precisely when his government was hosting an important diplomatic event. It could be an attempt to embarrass him, to show foreign investors that Burkina Faso was unstable and unsafe, or it could be something more calculated, a diversion to draw security resources away from the capital. Do it. Increase patrols, add checkpoints, but keep it subtle enough not to alarm the delegation. I don't want to give them the impression we're a war zone, even if we're fighting a war. And General, double the guards on the presidential palace and all government buildings. If someone is trying to create chaos today, they're not going to succeed. After hanging up, Traoré stood and walked to a wall map of Burkina Faso, studying the northern regions where the insurgency remained active. Despite his government's efforts, despite the recruitment of tens of thousands of volunteers for the VDP forces, despite the new Russian military equipment and training, the jihadist groups remained a persistent threat. It was the reality he lived with every day, trying to build a new Burkina Faso while simultaneously fighting those who wanted to tear it apart. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. His personal security chief, Colonel Zungrana, entered with an expression that immediately put Traoré on alert. Zungrana was not easily worried, and his current demeanor suggested something significant had happened. "What is it, Colonel?" "Sir, we've just received a report from our intelligence network. There was an unusual meeting last night at a hotel in downtown Ouagadougou. 3 individuals with no apparent official business, 2 foreign nationals, and 1 local businessman with connections to the previous regime." Traoré's eyes narrowed. "Let me guess. The timing of this meeting, right before our diplomatic visit, is not coincidental." "Exactly what I thought, sir. We've identified the foreign nationals as having links to mining interests in Europe. Specifically, companies that lost contracts when we nationalized the gold mines. The local businessman is known to have been close to officials in the previous government, the ones you removed for corruption. Do we know what they discussed?" "Not yet. We're working on acquiring surveillance footage and interviewing the hotel staff. But, sir, I think we need to consider the possibility that someone is planning to disrupt today's events. The combination of the insurgent activity in the north and this suspicious meeting in the capital, it feels coordinated." Traoré returned to his desk and sat down, his mind working through the possibilities. He had made many enemies in his rise to power and his subsequent reforms. Foreign mining companies that lost profitable contracts, Western governments angry about his pivot toward Russia and other non-traditional partners, elements of the old Burkinabe elite who had profited from corruption, even some military officers who had been bypassed or displaced during his restructuring of the armed forces. Any one of those groups had motive to sabotage today's diplomatic visit. The question was how they planned to do it, and whether his security measures would be sufficient to stop them. "Colonel, I want continuous updates throughout the day. Anything unusual, any deviation from expected patterns, any unexpected visitors, any technical problems with security systems. I want to know immediately, and coordinate with Minister Caboret's team. The diamond presentation is the centerpiece of this visit. If someone is planning disruption, that's the most likely target." Chapter 2. The aircraft touched down at Ouagadougou International Airport precisely on schedule, a gleaming private jet bearing the insignia of the visiting delegation. Traoré stood at the head of a carefully arranged receiving line, flanked by his key ministers and a ceremonial honor guard. The military band played the national anthems, first Burkina Faso's, then that of the visiting nation, as the delegation descended the aircraft stairs. The lead dignitary, Prince Khalil, was a man in his mid-50s with the bearing of someone accustomed to respect and authority. He wore traditional robes of exceptional quality, and his entourage matched his presentation, polished, professional, projecting wealth and power. As he approached, Traoré stepped forward with his hand extended, not in the typical Western handshake, but in his characteristic fist bump, a gesture that had become his signature, a small but deliberate rejection of colonial mannerisms. Prince Khalil adapted smoothly, returning the gesture with a slight smile. President Traoré, it is an honor to visit Burkina Faso. I have heard much about your leadership and your vision for your nation's future. Your Highness, welcome. We are grateful for your interest in partnership with Burkina Faso. I believe we have much to discuss about mutual opportunities. The formalities proceeded according to plan: the inspection of the honor guard, the brief remarks for the assembled media, the motorcade to the presidential palace. Throughout, Traoré maintained his characteristic composure, projecting confidence and control, while his mind constantly assessed every detail, every potential vulnerability. By early afternoon, the official talks had begun in the palace's main conference room. The discussion focused on the investment proposal. The Middle Eastern delegation was interested in purchasing a significant stake in several of Burkina Faso's newly nationalized mines, with the capital going toward infrastructure development and expansion of mining operations. The terms being discussed were far more favorable than anything Western companies had ever offered. Genuine partnership rather than exploitation. We believe in sovereignty, Prince Khalil said at one point, his tone earnest. We understand what it means to be a nation trying to control your own resources in a world where powerful forces want to dictate terms to you. Our proposal is simple. We provide capital and technical expertise. You maintain majority control and decision-making authority. The profits benefit both parties, but more importantly, they benefit the people of Burkina Faso. It was exactly what Traoré wanted to hear, though he remained cautiously optimistic. In his experience, everyone presented themselves as partners until the contracts were signed, and then the reality often diverged from the rhetoric. Still, the terms being discussed were substantive and specific. Real numbers, real commitments, real timelines. I appreciate your understanding of our position, Traoré responded. Burkina Faso has spent too long seeing our wealth extracted while our people remained poor. The nationalization program is not about rejecting foreign investment. It's about ensuring that investment serves our national interest first. If your government is truly committed to equitable partnership, then I believe we can build something significant together. The talks continued through the afternoon, breaking periodically for refreshments and informal conversations. Traoré used these breaks to observe the delegation members, noting their interactions, their body language, the subtle dynamics of who deferred to whom. The security consultants particularly drew his attention. They seemed overly interested in the palace layout, asking questions that went beyond normal curiosity about architecture. As evening approached, the schedule called for the formal presentation of the diamonds, the symbolic centerpiece that would seal the goodwill and demonstrate Burkina Faso's professional management of its mineral resources. The exhibition hall had been prepared meticulously, with lighting designed to show the diamonds at their best, security cameras covering every angle, and armed guards at every entrance. Minister Ouedraogo personally supervised the transfer of the diamonds from the State Vault to the exhibition hall. The collection included 23 stones of various sizes, the largest being a remarkable 15-carat diamond that would serve as the showcase piece. Together, they represented approximately $5 million in value, but more importantly, they represented Burkina Faso's future, proof that the country's diamond deposits, long underexploited, could be a major source of revenue. Traoré arrived at the exhibition hall 30 minutes before the scheduled presentation, wanting to personally verify everything was in order. The diamonds were displayed on black velvet in a custom-designed case, with individual descriptions and certificates of authenticity for each stone. The lighting made them sparkle with an almost hypnotic quality, and Traoré allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This was what sovereignty looked like: Burkinabe resources, managed by Burkinabe people for Burkinabe benefit. Everything is perfect, Minister, he told Ouedraogo, who stood nearby with the satisfaction of someone who had orchestrated every detail successfully. The delegation will be impressed. Thank you, Mr. President. I must say, seeing these diamonds, knowing they came from our own land, that the profits from them will fund schools and hospitals and roads in our country, it makes all the difficult work worthwhile. Prince Khalil and his delegation were scheduled to arrive in 15 minutes. Traoré used the time to review his speaking notes for the presentation. He planned to emphasize not just the diamond's beauty and value, but what they represented. A new chapter in Burkina Faso's development, a future where the country controlled its own destiny rather than having it dictated by foreign powers. The delegation arrived precisely on time, led into the exhibition hall with appropriate ceremony. Prince Khalil's expression as he saw the diamond display was exactly what Traoré had hoped for, genuine appreciation and interest. The prince moved closer to the case, examining the stones with the eye of someone who understood their value. "Magnificent," he said quietly. "These are truly exceptional specimens. The quality is remarkable, comparable to stones from much more established diamond operations." Traoré began his prepared remarks, speaking about Burkina Faso's mineral potential, about the professionalism of Sopamib's operations, about the opportunities for partnership that would benefit both nations. The delegation members listened attentively, some taking notes, others simply observing the display with clear interest. The presentation lasted 40 minutes, with Traoré fielding questions about extraction methods, quality control processes, and future production estimates. Throughout, he projected confidence and expertise, demonstrating that Burkina Faso was not some unsophisticated operation, but a serious player in the international minerals market. Finally, as the presentation concluded, Traoré invited the delegation to a state dinner where they could continue discussions in a more relaxed atmosphere. The group began filing out of the exhibition hall, with Minister Ouedraogo staying behind to supervise the return of the diamonds to the secure vault. It was during this transition, the brief window when the diamonds were being prepared for return to security, that everything changed. Colonel Zungrana appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent, gesturing for Traoré to step aside for a private word. "Sir, we have a problem. The security cameras in this hall went offline for approximately 90 seconds during the presentation. Just came back online, but that's a significant breach of protocol." Traoré felt his stomach tighten. "Where's Minister Ouedraogo?" "He's checking the diamonds now, verifying the count before transfer." They moved quickly back into the exhibition hall, where Ouedraogo stood over the display case, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly as he recounted the stones. When he looked up at Traoré, his expression confirmed what the president had already begun to fear. "Sir, 3 diamonds are missing, including the 15-carat showcase piece." Chapter 3. The next 30 minutes were controlled chaos. Traoré immediately ordered a complete lockdown of the presidential palace. No one in or out. All entrances secured, all visitors and staff to remain exactly where they were. Minister Ouedraogo doubled and then triple-checked the inventory, hoping against hope that somehow he had miscounted, that the diamonds would mysteriously reappear. They did not. 3 diamonds, worth approximately $2 million combined, had vanished. More importantly, their disappearance threatened to derail the most significant diplomatic and economic opportunity Burkina Faso had cultivated since Traoré took power. "Colonel Zungrana, I want to know exactly who was in this room during those 90 seconds when the cameras were offline," Traoré said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Staff, delegation members, security personnel, everyone. And I want to know how those cameras were disabled." "Already working on it, sir. But I need to raise a sensitive issue. The delegation is asking to leave. Prince Khalil's chief of staff says they have a scheduled departure time, and they're expressing concern about the lockdown." Traoré's mind raced. Letting the delegation leave before investigating the theft would be a massive failure, potentially allowing the thieves to escape with stolen Burkinabe resources. But forcibly detaining a diplomatic delegation would create an international incident, could destroy the partnership before it even began, and would confirm every Western narrative about Burkina Faso being an unstable, autocratic state. "Tell them I need 15 minutes to address a security matter, and then I'll explain the situation personally. They're not leaving until I've spoken with Prince Khalil directly." While Zungrana went to deliver that message, Traoré pulled Ouedraogo aside. "I need your honest assessment. Could this be an inside job? Someone from our own government?" Ouedraogo's expression was pained. "Mr. President, I don't want to believe it, but we have to consider every possibility. The timing of the camera malfunction, that wasn't random technical failure. Someone with knowledge of our security systems orchestrated that, which means either someone from our security team or someone who had access to information about our systems. That limits the suspects considerably. Or, Ouedraogo added reluctantly, someone from the delegation who gathered intelligence during their earlier palace visit and coordinated with an inside accomplice. It was the scenario Traoré had been trying not to consider, but it made terrible sense. The delegation's security consultants had shown unusual interest in the palace layout and systems. The suspicious meeting the night before involving foreign nationals with mining connections, the convenient insurgent activity in the north that had drawn some security resources away from the capital. This wasn't opportunistic theft, Traoré said, the pattern becoming clearer. This was planned, coordinated, designed to embarrass us at the worst possible moment. Someone wants this partnership to fail. The question is who? Western mining companies who lost contracts, elements of the old regime trying to destabilize your government, the delegation itself, setting up a provocation, or all of the above working together, Traoré replied grimly. But right now, we need to handle this immediately. If those diamonds leave this palace, we may never recover them, and we'll look incompetent. If we handle this wrong, we create an international incident and confirm every negative narrative about Burkina Faso. We're walking a razor's edge. He straightened his uniform, composed his expression, and headed toward the reception room where Prince Khalil and his delegation had been asked to wait. The prince stood near a window, his body language suggesting carefully controlled frustration. His security consultants flanked him, their expressions less diplomatic and more openly hostile at the delay. Your Highness, I apologize for the inconvenience, Traoré began, deciding that direct honesty was his best approach. We've encountered a significant security issue, and I felt it necessary to brief you personally before you depart. What kind of security issue? Prince Khalil's tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. During the diamond presentation, several stones went missing. 3 pieces, including our showcase diamond. The security cameras were disabled during a critical 90 seconds, suggesting this was not random theft, but a coordinated operation. The prince's expression shifted through surprise, concern, and then careful calculation. Mr. President, are you suggesting my delegation is somehow involved in this theft? I'm not suggesting anything yet, but I'm sure you understand that until we've investigated and secured the situation, I cannot allow anyone to leave the palace. That includes your delegation, my own staff, and security personnel. It's not personal. It's necessary procedure. One of the security consultants stepped forward, his posture aggressive. This is unacceptable. We are here on a diplomatic mission with all the protections that entails. You cannot detain us like common criminals. Traoré turned his gaze on the man, and something in his expression, perhaps the steel forged through years of combat operations, or the authority that came with leading a nation through crisis, made the consultant step back slightly. I am not detaining you as criminals. I am securing a crime scene until we understand what happened. If you or anyone in your delegation is innocent, as I hope and expect you are, then you have nothing to fear from a brief investigation. However, if someone resists this reasonable security measure, that itself would be suspicious, wouldn't it? Prince Khalil raised a hand, quieting his security consultant. Mr. President, I appreciate your candor, and I understand your position. You've suffered a theft. You need to investigate, and standard procedure requires everyone present to be interviewed. However, you must also understand my position. If word spreads that my delegation is under investigation for theft, it damages my reputation and my government's credibility. How do you propose we resolve this situation? It was the right question, and Traoré respected the prince for asking it so directly. I propose we conduct this investigation with utmost discretion and speed. My security team will interview everyone who was in or near the exhibition hall during the relevant time frame. We'll review all available footage, check all personal belongings and vehicles with appropriate search protocols, and hopefully identify the thieves quickly. If, as I expect, your delegation is cleared, you'll be free to leave with our apologies for the delay and our assurance that this incident will not affect our partnership negotiations. And if the investigation doesn't resolve quickly, then we have a more serious problem, one that will require both our governments to address with full transparency. But Your Highness, I give you my word. My interest is in finding the truth and recovering the stolen property, not in creating diplomatic incidents or casting baseless suspicion on honorable guests. The prince studied Traoré for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Conduct your investigation. My delegation will cooperate fully, but I would request that one of my own security personnel be present during interviews with my team members to ensure proper protocols are followed." "Agreed. And I'll have Minister Ouedraogo coordinate with your Chief of Staff to ensure this process is as non-intrusive as possible." As Traoré left to coordinate the investigation, he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was more than just stolen diamonds. It was a test of his leadership, his judgment, his ability to navigate complex situations where there were no perfect solutions, handle it wrong, and he could destroy a crucial partnership, create an international incident, or allow thieves to escape with Burkinabe resources. Handle it right, and he might not only recover the diamonds, but also demonstrate that Burkina Faso, under his leadership, was a serious, professional nation that would not tolerate corruption or criminality from anyone, including powerful diplomatic guests. The investigation was about to begin, and the truth, whatever it turned out to be, would have consequences far beyond 3 missing diamonds. If you're enjoying this story, consider subscribing to the channel so we can continue bringing you more and more content. Chapter 4. The presidential palace had become a pressure cooker of tension and barely concealed suspicion. Colonel Zungrana had organized the security team into 3 investigation groups, one reviewing all security footage and technical systems, another conducting interviews with palace staff who had been near the exhibition hall, and a third preparing to search all vehicles and belongings before anyone would be allowed to leave. Traoré established himself in a secure operations room that had been set up for crisis management, with multiple screens displaying camera feeds from throughout the palace and a communications system that kept him connected to all the investigation teams. Minister Ouedraogo sat beside him, reviewing the diamond inventory documents repeatedly, as if somehow the missing stones might reappear if he just looked at the paperwork enough times. And the technical team found something. Zungrana entered the room with a tablet displaying code and system logs. The camera malfunction wasn't a random technical failure. It was a deliberate hack, executed by someone with intimate knowledge of our security systems. They used an administrative access code that's supposed to be limited to only 5 people. "Which 5? Traoré demanded. "Ask me, Minister Ouedraogo, the head of palace security, and the IT director who maintains the systems. Sir, it means either one of those 5 people is the thief or accomplice, or someone compromised one of those access codes." Traoré's mind was already racing through the implications. Check all 5 people immediately. Review their movements during the relevant time frame, their communications, their bank accounts if necessary. If someone sold that access code, I want to know to whom and for how much. As Zungrana left to implement those orders, Ouedraogo spoke up quietly. "Mr. President, I need to say something. I was responsible for the diamond security. If my oversight was inadequate, if I trusted the wrong people or missed warning signs, then ultimately this theft is my failure." Traoré turned to his Prime Minister, seeing the genuine distress in the man's expression. "Minister, you're one of the few people I trust absolutely. If you're compromised, then I have no one I can rely on, and Burkina Faso is in worse trouble than a few stolen diamonds would suggest. Do you have any reason to believe someone on your team might have been involved?" "No concrete reason, but there's always been tension about the nationalization program. Not everyone in government fully supported it. Some officials maintained connections to the foreign mining companies, received consulting fees or gifts. I've tried to root out that corruption, but it's like trying to eliminate weeds. You pull up what you can see, but the roots run deeper than you realize." It was a depressingly accurate metaphor for governance in post-colonial Africa, Traoré thought. Decades of foreign exploitation hadn't just extracted mineral wealth. It had created entire networks of local collaborators who benefited from the extractive systems and who actively resisted reforms that threatened their position. "We need to look at this from a different angle," Traoré said, standing to pace the room as he organized his thoughts. "Follow the motive. Who benefits from this theft? It's not just the monetary value of the diamonds. Anyone sophisticated enough to orchestrate this could have targeted far more valuable assets if pure profit was the goal. No, this is about embarrassing my government, about sabotaging this partnership, about making Burkina Faso look incompetent and unstable, which means Western mining interests. Ouedraogo concluded. They've lost billions from the nationalization program. If they can prevent us from forming successful new partnerships, we'll be economically isolated, unable to develop the mines properly, forced to eventually accept their return on their terms. Or elements of the old regime who want to destabilize my government generally. Or, Traoré paused, considering a darker possibility, or the delegation itself, creating a manufactured crisis that gives them leverage in the partnership negotiations or provides a pretext to walk away while blaming us for the failure. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. One of the security team leaders entered with a preliminary report on the staff interviews. Sir, we've interviewed 14 palace staff members so far. Most have solid alibis. They were in other parts of the building, supervised by multiple people during the critical period. But 2 staff members are concerning. A cleaning worker who was supposed to be in the West Wing was seen near the exhibition hall, and a communications technician who has administrator access to the security systems can't fully account for his whereabouts during a 20-minute window that includes the camera malfunction. Bring them both in for more detailed questioning, separately, and record everything. But be professional. We're investigating, not accusing. Yet, as the investigation progressed, Traoré received an update that made the situation even more complex. The delegation's security chief was requesting permission to search his own team's belongings to demonstrate their innocence. It was simultaneously a gesture of cooperation and a subtle challenge, implying that if Traoré didn't accept the offer, it would suggest he was trying to avoid exonerating the delegation. Accept the offer, Traoré decided, but our security personnel conduct the search, with their representatives present to observe, and make it thorough. Luggage, vehicles, electronic devices. If they truly have nothing to hide, they'll accept complete transparency. The search of the delegation's belongings began 2 hours after the theft was discovered. Traoré watched the process via security cameras, seeing the careful, methodical examination of luggage, the inspection of vehicles, the review of electronic devices. The delegation members remained calm and cooperative, their body language suggesting either genuine innocence or exceptional composure. But it was during the search of one of the security consultant's luggage that something unexpected emerged. Not diamonds, but documents. Encrypted files on a laptop computer that once decoded by Burkina Faso's cybersecurity team, revealed detailed intelligence about Sopamib's operations, internal financial projections, and confidential reports about diamond deposit locations that should have been closely guarded state secrets. How did he get this information? Traoré demanded, when Zungrana brought him the findings. These are classified mining reports, internal Sopamib documents that even most government officials don't have access to. That's what I want to know, sir. Either he had a very well-placed source inside our government, or our information security is far worse than we thought. But look at this. Zungrana pointed to timestamps on the files. Some of these documents were accessed and copied within the past week, which means the leak is very recent, and the source is still active. The picture was becoming clearer and more troubling. The delegation hadn't just arrived for partnership negotiations, they'd arrived with extensive intelligence about Burkina Faso's mining operations, intelligence that could only have come from someone inside the government. The diamond theft might be connected to this broader espionage operation, or it might be a separate but concurrent operation, taking advantage of the same security vulnerabilities. Confront the security consultant, Traoré ordered. I want to know where he got those files and who his source is. Be firm but professional. We need information, not a diplomatic incident. But make it clear that possessing classified Burkinabe state secrets is a serious crime, and his cooperation in identifying the source might influence how we proceed with potential charges. As Zungrana left to conduct that interrogation, Traoré turned to Ouedraogo. This isn't just about stolen diamonds anymore. This is about a systematic penetration of our government by foreign intelligence services. And if they have someone placed highly enough to access classified Sopamib documents, that person could also have facilitated the diamond theft. So we're looking for a traitor in our own ranks, Ouedraogo said grimly. Someone with high-level access, connections to foreign interests, and motivations that align with sabotaging the nationalization program. And someone who knew about today's diamond presentation, knew about our security systems, and had the technical sophistication or access to compromise those systems at precisely the right moment, The investigation was expanding beyond a simple theft case into something far more serious, a matter of national security, of foreign infiltration into the highest levels of government, of a coordinated operation to undermine Burkina Faso's sovereignty, and somewhere in the presidential palace, a traitor was watching these events unfold, perhaps planning their next move. Chapter 5. The interrogation of the security consultant, a man who identified himself as Ahmad Rashid, took place in one of the palace's secure conference rooms. Traoré watched via video monitor as Colonel Zungrana conducted the questioning, with Prince Khalil's chief of staff present as an observer to ensure proper procedures were followed. Rashid was composed, but clearly aware of the serious nature of the situation. When confronted with the classified documents found on his laptop, his expression shifted from casual confidence to careful calculation. "Mr. Rashid, you're carrying intelligence reports marked as classified Burkinabe state secrets," Zungrana began, his tone professional but firm. "I need you to explain how you acquired these documents and for what purpose." "I'm a security consultant," Rashid replied evenly. "My job is to conduct due diligence before my government commits to major investments. These documents were provided to me by a source who works in the mining sector here in Burkina Faso. I was assured they were industry reports, not state secrets." "Who is this source?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose that without authorization from my government. Protecting sources is fundamental to intelligence work." Zungrana leaned forward slightly. "This is not an intelligence operation between governments, Mr. Rashid. This is industrial espionage or potentially worse, and it may be connected to the theft of diamonds from this palace just hours ago. Your cooperation in identifying your source could mean the difference between this being treated as a professional misunderstanding or as a serious criminal matter." Before Rashid could respond, Prince Khalil's chief of staff interjected. "Don't, Colonel. I need to consult with His Highness before my government's representative answers questions that might compromise our intelligence protocols. This is beyond a simple theft investigation now. You're asking us to reveal operational security information." It was, Traoré recognized from his monitoring position, a calculated stalling tactic. The delegation was now trying to reframe the situation as a mutual intelligence issue between governments, rather than a matter of espionage against Burkina Faso. It was a sophisticated maneuver that would complicate the investigation and provide diplomatic cover. But Traoré wasn't willing to let them control the narrative. He activated the intercom to the interrogation room. "This is President Traoré, Chief of Staff. I respect your concern for your government's protocols, but let me be clear about the situation. Classified documents belonging to Burkina Faso have been illegally acquired and are in the possession of a member of your delegation. This is a crime against Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Whether it's treated as a serious diplomatic incident or a misunderstanding that can be resolved quietly depends entirely on your government's willingness to cooperate in identifying how those documents were obtained. I suggest you consult with Prince Khalil immediately about how he wishes to proceed." There was a brief pause, then the Chief of Staff nodded and excused himself to speak with the Prince. Rashid remained in the room, now under the guard of 2 Burkinabe security officers, his earlier confidence visibly diminished. While that consultation was happening, Traoré received an update from the team investigating the palace staff. The communications technician with administrator access had broken under questioning, admitting that he had provided his security system credentials to a foreign contact in exchange for a substantial payment, $50,000, deposited into an offshore account. He claimed he thought he was just helping with routine security assessments and had no knowledge of any plan to steal diamonds. "Do we believe him?" Traoré asked Zungrana when the colonel returned from the interrogation room. "Partially. I think he's telling the truth about not knowing specifically about the diamond theft. But he's lying about thinking it was routine. $50,000 for credentials isn't a routine payment, and he knows it. He sold access to our security systems, knowing something illicit was planned, but possibly without full knowledge of what. Who was the foreign contact who paid him? He claims he never met them in person. Everything was arranged through encrypted communications and cryptocurrency transfers, but our cyber team is analyzing his devices and might be able to trace the communications back to a source. Good. Keep him detained and get everything you can from his devices. He's admitted to a serious crime, and he's going to help us identify everyone involved even if he doesn't realize that's what he's doing." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the cleaning staff who had been near the exhibition hall during the theft reported seeing something unusual. One of the delegation members, not a security consultant, but a supposed mining engineer, briefly entering a storage room adjacent to the exhibition hall. The cleaning worker thought nothing of it at the time, assuming the man was perhaps lost or looking for a restroom, but in hindsight, the timing was suspicious. "Get me the footage from that corridor," Traoré ordered immediately. Even if the exhibition hall cameras were down, there might be coverage from adjacent areas. The security team pulled the footage, and what they found was illuminating. The delegation member, identified as Hassan Mahmoud, a mining engineer in the official delegation list, had indeed entered the storage room. He was inside for approximately 2 minutes, emerging just as the cameras in the exhibition hall were being reactivated. His body language suggested someone who had just completed a stressful task, and there was a noticeable bulge in his jacket pocket that hadn't been there when he entered. "That's our thief," Traoré said with certainty. "Or at least one of them. Question is, where are the diamonds now?" They weren't found in his luggage during the search, which means either he's hidden them exceptionally well, or he's passed them to an accomplice. Or, Ouedraogo added, he never intended to keep them. This could be about creating a crisis rather than profiting from stolen gems. Take the diamonds, create chaos and suspicion, then they mysteriously reappear somewhere embarrassing, like in the luggage of one of your ministers, suggesting internal corruption. It was a disturbing possibility, but entirely plausible. If the goal was to embarrass Traoré's government and sabotage the partnership negotiations, planting the diamonds to frame someone in the Burkinabe government would achieve that perfectly. "We need to move carefully here," Traoré decided. "If we confront Mahmoud directly about the footage, he'll deny it, claim he was just looking for a restroom, and we'll have a diplomatic standoff with inconclusive evidence. Instead, let's use what we know to pressure the delegation into cooperation." He called for Prince Khalil to meet him privately, without the various advisors and officials who had been present in earlier discussions. The prince agreed, and 15 minutes later, the two leaders sat across from each other in Traoré's private office. "Your Highness, I'm going to share some information with you in confidence, and I need you to make a decision about how your government wishes to proceed," Traoré began. "We have evidence that places one of your delegation members at the scene of the theft during the relevant time frame. We have evidence that another member of your delegation was in possession of classified Burkinabe state secrets. And we have evidence that a member of our own staff sold security access to foreign contacts. These are not coincidences. They're parts of a coordinated operation." Prince Khalil's expression was grave. "What are you suggesting, Mr. President?" "I'm suggesting that someone wanted this partnership to fail. Whether that's elements within your own delegation acting independently, or outside forces who have infiltrated both our governments, or some combination, I don't know yet. But what I do know is that we're both victims here. Your government has been compromised, my government has been compromised, and unless we work together to expose the full truth, both of us will be damaged by this situation." The prince studied Traoré carefully, clearly weighing whether this was genuine cooperation or a sophisticated trap. Finally, he spoke. "I will be honest with you, Mr. President. When I was briefed about this investment opportunity, I was told by my advisors that it was an excellent prospect, but I was also warned by certain contacts, people with connections to Western mining interests, that your government was unstable, that you couldn't be trusted to honor agreements, that nationalization was just a cover for corruption. I dismissed those warnings because they seemed like the usual propaganda, but now I wonder if those contacts were trying to poison the well, so to speak." "They were," Traoré confirmed, "and they may have succeeded in placing someone in your delegation specifically to sabotage this visit, someone who could steal documents, to conduct espionage, and steal diamonds to create a crisis. The question is, are you willing to help me expose them?" Chapter 6. Prince Khalil's decision to cooperate fully with the investigation marked a turning point. Together, Traoré and the prince orchestrated what amounted to a counterintelligence operation within the confines of the presidential palace. The prince agreed to question his own delegation members separately and privately, leveraging his authority to demand honest answers without diplomatic niceties. Meanwhile, Traoré's security team continued analyzing technical evidence and tracking down the networks of contacts that connected various suspects. The mining engineer, Hassan Mahmoud, was brought in for private questioning by Prince Khalil himself. Traoré watched via video monitor as the prince confronted Mahmoud with the security footage and asked direct questions about his movements during the diamond presentation. "Hassan, I need complete honesty," the prince said, his tone conveying both authority and disappointment. "You were seen entering a storage room adjacent to the exhibition hall during the exact time when the diamonds disappeared. The security footage shows you emerging with something in your pocket that wasn't there when you entered. I'm giving you one opportunity to explain yourself before this becomes an international incident that will disgrace your family and destroy your career." Mahmoud's composure cracked. His hands trembled, and sweat appeared on his forehead despite the cool temperature of the room. For a long moment, he said nothing, clearly weighing his options, calculating whether denial or confession would serve him better. "Your Highness," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I was approached 3 months ago by representatives of a mining consortium. They knew I would be part of this delegation. They offered me $200,000 to create problems during the visit, to gather intelligence about Burkina Faso's mining operations, and to do something that would embarrass the government and make the partnership negotiations fail." "The diamonds," Prince Khalil stated flatly. "Yes, I was supposed to take them and hide them somewhere that would make it look like someone from the Burkinabe government had stolen them. The cameras were disabled by a contact they had inside the palace. Everything was arranged. I just had to follow instructions. Where are the diamonds now?" Mahmoud reached into his jacket with shaking hands and produced a small cloth pouch. "I couldn't do it. I took them, yes, but when it came time to plant them to frame an innocent person, I couldn't go through with it. I've been carrying them, not knowing what to do." Prince Khalil took the pouch and opened it, confirming the 3 diamonds were inside. His expression was a mixture of relief and disgust. "You have disgraced yourself and endangered my government's credibility. We will discuss consequences later. Right now, I need you to tell President Traoré's security team everything. Every contact and every instruction, every detail of who recruited you and why." The confession session that followed lasted 3 hours. Mahmoud provided names, dates, communications records, and bank account information that traced back to a consortium of European mining companies who had lost contracts when Burkina Faso nationalized the gold mines. They had orchestrated an elaborate operation to sabotage the Middle Eastern partnership, using Mahmoud as their inside agent, the compromised palace technician as their access point, and a network of contacts that included some former Burkinabe government officials who still resented Traoré's reforms. "It's even more extensive than we thought," Zungrana reported to Traoré as they reviewed Mahmoud's information. "This wasn't just about the diamonds or even just about sabotaging this particular partnership. They've been conducting systematic espionage against Sopam IB for months, gathering intelligence about deposit locations, production volumes, financial performance, everything that would help them understand how successful nationalization has been and how to undermine it." Traoré felt anger rising, but forced himself to remain analytical. "And so the diamond theft was just one operation in a larger campaign. They wanted us to fail, to look incompetent, to scare away potential investors, and if they could frame someone in our government, create internal suspicion and purges, even better from their perspective." "Exactly. They've lost billions from nationalization, and they're willing to spend millions trying to reverse it, or at least prevent other nations from following Burkina Faso's example. Well, they've failed. We've recovered the diamonds, identified their inside agent, and now we have evidence of a coordinated foreign operation to undermine our sovereignty. The question is how we use this information." Prince Khalil joined them in the operations room, carrying the recovered diamonds. "Mr. President, I cannot adequately apologize for my delegation being compromised in this way. This was a failure of our security vetting, and it has embarrassed my government. However, I would like to propose something." "I'm listening, Your Highness." "Instead of treating this as a crisis that ends our partnership discussions, let's use it as proof that our cooperation is necessary. Western mining interests don't want us to work together. That's why they went to such lengths to sabotage this visit. If we allow them to succeed, if we let this incident divide us, then they win. But if we proceed with the partnership, if we combine our resources and intelligence to counter these operations, then we demonstrate that African and Middle Eastern nations can cooperate on equal terms without Western interference. It was exactly the kind of bold thinking Traoré appreciated. Your Highness, I think this experience has shown that we both need partners who share our commitment to sovereignty and equitable development. I propose we don't just proceed with the original investment discussions. I propose we expand them. Let's create a partnership that includes not just mining investment, but also security cooperation, intelligence sharing, and joint efforts to counter foreign interference in both our regions. The prince extended his hand, not for his customary handshake, but adapting to Traoré's preferred fist bump. I believe that's an excellent proposal, Mr. President, and I think the first joint operation of this partnership should be fully exposing this espionage network and holding those responsible accountable. Chapter 7. The rest of the evening transformed from crisis management into strategic planning. With the diamonds recovered and the immediate threat resolved, Traoré and Prince Khalil began working with their respective teams to document everything that had been discovered and to plan the next steps in responding to the foreign operation against both governments. Traoré decided on a multifaceted approach. First, the compromised palace technician would be prosecuted publicly, sending a message about the serious consequences of betraying Burkina Faso's national security. Second, Hassan Mahmoud would face charges in Burkina Faso for theft and espionage, though Prince Khalil negotiated for him to be remanded to his home country's jurisdiction after cooperating fully with the investigation, a compromise that maintained diplomatic courtesy while ensuring accountability. Third, and most importantly, Burkina Faso would publicly expose the foreign mining consortium's operation, using the evidence to embarrass the companies involved and to demonstrate to other African nations the lengths to which former colonial powers would go to maintain economic control. This needs to be handled carefully, Minister Ouedraogo advised as they drafted the public statement, and we have to be specific enough to be credible, but careful enough not to provoke retaliation. These are powerful companies with connections to powerful governments. If we attack them too directly, they might escalate. Let them escalate, Traoré responded, his tone hardening. Burkina Faso didn't nationalize our mines to play nice with companies that spent decades exploiting us. We did it to reclaim our sovereignty. If exposing their espionage operations provokes retaliation, then at least we're fighting openly, instead of being slowly undermined in secret. But he also recognized the wisdom in Ouedraogo's caution. Burkina Faso was not strong enough to stand alone against concentrated Western economic power. The partnership with Prince Khalil's government was important precisely because it provided alternative sources of capital and support that reduced dependence on Western institutions. The final statement was crafted as a factual report rather than an accusation. It detailed the timeline of events, the discovery of the espionage operation, the recovery of the diamonds, and the evidence of foreign corporate involvement, all presented as a case study in how African nations faced sophisticated efforts to undermine their sovereignty. It named the specific mining companies involved, cited the documented financial transfers and communications, and concluded with an announcement that Burkina Faso and its Middle Eastern partners would be expanding their cooperation to include intelligence sharing and joint security measures against foreign interference. This is going to cause an international uproar, Prince Khalil observed as he reviewed the draft. The companies you're naming have significant influence. They'll deny everything, claim you're fabricating evidence, accuse both our governments of being authoritarian and hostile to legitimate business interests. I know, Traoré replied, but they'll be lying and we'll have evidence to prove it. And more importantly, every other African nation that's considering resource nationalization will see this and understand what they're up against. Knowledge is power, Your Highness. For too long, these operations happened in the shadows, and African leaders were picked off one by one. Coups and assassinations, economic sabotage. By bringing it into the light, we make it harder for them to operate and easier for others to resist. They agreed to release the statement the following morning, giving both governments time to prepare for the reaction and to coordinate their messaging. Prince Khalil would issue a parallel statement from his government, confirming the details and announcing the expanded partnership despite the attempted sabotage. But before any public announcements could be made, Traoré wanted to address the more sensitive issue of the information leak within his own government. The compromised technician had been the access point for this particular operation, but the classified SOPAMIB documents found in Ahmad Rashid's possession suggested a higher-level source, someone with access to sensitive mining data that even most government officials weren't privy to. "We need to conduct an internal security review," Traoré told Colonel Zungrana. "I want to know everyone who had access to the documents that were found in Rashid's possession. Check their communications, their bank accounts, their associates. Someone with significant access has been selling information, and we need to identify them before they can do more damage." The review began immediately, conducted with absolute secrecy to avoid alerting the potential mole. It was a distressing process, going through the records of people Traoré had appointed personally, people he had trusted to implement his vision for Burkina Faso's development. But he had learned long ago that trust had to be verified, especially when dealing with systems corrupted by decades of foreign influence and local collaboration. The investigation focused on 3 officials who had the appropriate level of access to the compromised documents. One was a senior administrator in SOPAMIB, a mining engineer who had previously worked for French companies before joining the nationalized operation. The second was a mid-level official in the Ministry of Mines, a career bureaucrat who had survived multiple government changes. The third was a special advisor to Minister Ouedraogo himself, someone with close connections to the Prime Minister and therefore access to highly sensitive information. "Any of them could be the leak," Zungrana reported. Oesebas, the SOPAMIB administrator, has maintained contacts with his former employers, not unusual in the mining industry, but potentially concerning. The ministry official has suddenly increased lifestyle beyond his government salary, new car, private school for his children, expensive home renovations. The advisor has encrypted communications with contacts abroad that we haven't been able to fully trace. "Which one feels most likely to you?" Traoré asked. The ministry official. "The sudden wealth, the timing of his spending increases, correlating with when we know documents were being passed to foreign contacts. It fits the profile, but I could be wrong. We need more evidence." They decided on a controlled operation to identify the leak. They would create a fake classified document, something plausible but containing specific information that wasn't real, and ensure it was accessible only to the 3 suspects. Then they would monitor to see if that false information appeared in any foreign communications or intelligence reports. It's like the old trick of printing different versions of classified documents with unique identifiers, Ouedraogo noted. Except instead of tracking physical leaks, we're tracking information flow. Exactly. And if our suspect takes the bait, we'll know definitively who's been selling our secrets. While that operation was being set up, Traoré took a moment to reflect on the broader implications of everything that had happened. The diamond theft had initially seemed like a simple, if high-profile, crime. But investigating it had exposed a sophisticated foreign espionage operation, revealed internal security vulnerabilities, and ultimately led to a stronger partnership with potential allies who shared Burkina Faso's commitment to sovereignty and equitable development. It was, he realized, emblematic of the challenges of leading an African nation trying to assert genuine independence in the 21st century. Nothing was ever as simple as it appeared. Every initiative to reclaim sovereignty prompted counter-operations from those who benefited from the extractive colonial systems. Every new partnership had to be carefully vetted for hidden agendas. Every employee, no matter how trusted, was a potential vulnerability if foreign powers offered sufficient inducement for betrayal. But Traoré had not taken power through 2 coups, fought insurgents in the Sahel, and restructured Burkina Faso's economy just to surrender to these challenges. The stolen diamonds would be returned. The traitors would be identified and prosecuted. The foreign operation would be exposed. And Burkina Faso would move forward, perhaps bruised but undeniably resilient, toward the future of genuine sovereignty that Traoré had committed his life to building. Tomorrow would bring the public statement, the international reaction, and almost certainly new challenges. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had been tested, and they had passed the test. The diamonds that had vanished during the official visit had been recovered. The silent inspection Traoré had ordered had shocked the diplomats and exposed the truth, and Burkina Faso had demonstrated, once again, that it would not be an easy target for those who sought to undermine its independence. Chapter 8. The dawn brought with it the weight of public disclosure. Traoré reviewed the final draft of the statement one last time, considering each word and its potential implications. In the world of international relations and resource politics, words were weapons. They could defend sovereignty or provide ammunition to enemies. The statement needed to be precise, verifiable, and powerful enough to change narratives. At 9 o'clock Ouagadougou time, coordinated with similar announcements from Prince Khalil's government, Traoré stood before a carefully arranged press conference. International media had been invited, along with Burkinabe press, creating an audience that would carry this story across continents. Behind Traoré stood Minister Ouedraogo and Colonel Zungrana, their presence symbolizing the unity of civilian and security leadership in addressing this issue. Yesterday, during an official diplomatic visit, Traoré began, his voice steady and clear. 3 diamonds that were being presented as part of partnership negotiations disappeared from a secure location in the presidential palace. This theft could have been dismissed as simple criminality, but investigation revealed something far more significant: a coordinated foreign espionage operation designed to sabotage Burkina Faso's efforts to form equitable partnerships for developing our natural resources. He proceeded to lay out the evidence systematically: the compromised security systems, the classified documents found in the possession of a delegation member, the confession of the individual who had stolen the diamonds, the financial trails connecting back to European mining companies who had lost contracts when Burkina Faso nationalized its mines. Each revelation was supported by documentation displayed on screens behind him: transaction records, communications logs, security footage. This operation was not just about stealing diamonds, Traoré continued, his tone sharpening. It was about undermining Burkina Faso's sovereignty, about trying to force us back into exploitative relationships where our resources enrich others while our people remain poor. The companies involved spent months conducting espionage against our state mining operations, gathering intelligence about our deposits and production, and ultimately attempting to sabotage our partnership discussions by creating a crisis that would embarrass both governments involved. The assembled journalists were silent, some taking furious notes, others recording every word. Traoré could see the calculation in their expressions. They knew this was a major story, but they were also aware of the powerful interests he was challenging. However, I am pleased to report that this operation failed, Traoré said, allowing a slight smile. The diamonds have been recovered. The individuals involved have been identified and will face appropriate legal consequences. And rather than destroying the partnership negotiations, this incident has demonstrated exactly why Burkina Faso and other nations must work together to resist foreign interference. Prince Khalil's government has agreed to expand our cooperation to include security and intelligence sharing, ensuring that future operations against either of our nations can be detected and countered more effectively. The questions that followed the statement were predictable but probing. Western journalists asked whether Traoré had evidence to support his claims, whether this was merely an excuse to justify authoritarian behavior, whether he was damaging Burkina Faso's investment climate by attacking legitimate businesses. African journalists asked how other nations could protect themselves from similar operations, what specific steps the expanded partnership would include, and whether Traoré expected retaliation from the named companies. To each question, Traoré responded with deliberate precision, neither overstating his case nor backing down from the documented facts. When challenged about evidence, he offered to provide copies of the key documents to any credible journalistic investigation. When questioned about investment climate, he pointedly noted that Burkina Faso welcomed legitimate investment, but would not tolerate espionage and sabotage disguised as business activity. "Let me be clear about something," he said, in response to one particularly aggressive questioner from a Western news agency. Burkina Faso nationalized our mines because decades of foreign ownership resulted in billions of dollars leaving our country while our people remained impoverished. That is not anti-business, that is pro-Burkinabe. When companies respond to legitimate nationalization, not by negotiating fair partnerships, but by conducting espionage and sabotage, they prove exactly why nationalization was necessary. They're not interested in win-win relationships. They're interested in maintaining exploitative arrangements. The press conference lasted 90 minutes, and by its end, the story was spreading globally. International news agencies picked up the narrative, though their framing varied dramatically, based on their political and economic alignments. Western media generally emphasized concerns about an investment climate and a rule of law, while African and some Middle Eastern outlets focused on the exposure of foreign interference and espionage. As Traoré returned to his office after the press conference, he found Colonel Zungrana waiting with an urgent update on the internal investigation for the information leak. "Sir, the trap worked. The false document we created, the fake geological survey suggesting major new diamond deposits in a specific location, has shown up in communications we're monitoring. The ministry official made an encrypted call to a known contact at one of the European mining companies, and our signals intelligence captured enough to confirm he passed the false information. So we have our mole," Traoré said, feeling a mixture of satisfaction at the confirmation and anger at the betrayal. "Bring him in. I want to question him personally." The ministry official, a man named Soumaïla Compaoré, was escorted to Traoré's office under guard. He was in his mid-50s, a career bureaucrat who had served under 3 different governments, always managing to maintain his position through political changes. Now he stood before Traoré, his expression attempting defiance but undermined by visible nervousness. "Mr. Compaoré, we have evidence that you've been selling classified information to foreign mining companies," Traoré said without preamble. "We have communications records, we have financial transfers to offshore accounts in your name, and we have you passing false information that we planted specifically to identify our leak. Do you deny any of this?" Compaoré's defiance crumbled. "Mr. President, you don't understand the position I was in. When you nationalized the mines, many of us who had worked with the foreign companies for years suddenly found ourselves exposed. They knew things about us, about arrangements we'd made, payments we'd received. They threatened to expose everything if we didn't continue cooperating with them." "So you were being blackmailed," Traoré stated. "And rather than coming to me, rather than trusting that a government fighting for Burkina Faso's sovereignty would protect you from foreign blackmail, you chose to continue betraying your country. I had no choice. They would have ruined me, destroyed my career, possibly had me prosecuted under the old regime's corruption laws. I have a family, Mr. President. I couldn't risk—" "Enough," Traoré's voice cut through the excuses. "And you did have a choice, Mr. Compaoré. Every day you chose to prioritize your personal comfort over your country's interests. You chose to help foreign companies undermine the very reforms that were trying to break the cycle of exploitation you claim to be a victim of. And in doing so, you endangered not just Burkina Faso's mining operations, but our national security, our diplomatic relationships, and the lives of everyone working to build a better future." He turned to the guards. "Take him into custody. He'll face full prosecution for espionage, corruption, and treason. And Colonel, I want every detail of his communications and contacts documented. If there are others in our government who are similarly compromised, I want them identified immediately." As Compaoré was led away, Ouedraogo entered the office with reports of the international reaction to Traoré's press conference. As expected, it was sharply divided. The mining companies named in the statement had issued denials, claiming Traoré's allegations were fabricated to justify his authoritarian rule. Several Western governments had expressed concern about the accusations and called for independent investigations, but there was also significant support, particularly from across Africa. Multiple African heads of state had issued statements praising Traoré's transparency in exposing foreign interference. Several nations announced they were conducting their own security reviews of foreign mining operations and diplomatic interactions. On social media, Is Burkina Sovereignty was trending globally, with young Africans across the continent expressing support for Traoré's stance against foreign exploitation. "This is exactly what we hoped for," Ouedraogo said, reviewing the reactions. "The Western companies and governments are trying to spin this as about you personally, but the broader narrative is about sovereignty and the right of African nations to control their own resources. You've started a conversation that goes far beyond Burkina Faso." Chapter 9. The following days brought a cascade of developments, some predictable, others surprising. The mining companies named in Traoré's statement filed defamation lawsuits in European courts, claiming billions in damages to their reputations. Traoré's response was to release additional documentation, more communications intercepts, more financial records, each release methodically countering their denials and building the case that the espionage operation had been systematic and prolonged. Prince Khalil followed through on his commitment to expanded cooperation, sending a delegation of security experts to Ouagadougou to work with Burkina Faso's intelligence services in mapping the full extent of foreign interference operations. Their joint investigation revealed that the diamond theft operation was just one node in a larger network that had targeted multiple African nations attempting resource nationalization. It's almost industrial in scale, one of the Middle Eastern intelligence analysts reported during a briefing. These companies have entire departments dedicated to what they call risk management, but what is essentially espionage and sabotage against governments that threaten their profit margins. They recruit local assets, plant agents in diplomatic delegations, coordinate with their home governments, intelligence services. It's a comprehensive operation to maintain extractive relationships. The revelations led to a broader conversation within the Alliance of Sahel States, the Confederation of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, that Traoré had helped establish. All three nations had pursued resource nationalization to varying degrees, and all three had experienced various forms of foreign resistance. Now they began coordinating their security measures, sharing intelligence about suspected foreign operations, and developing common strategies for protecting their sovereignty. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source. A senior executive from one of the European mining companies named in Traoré expose requested a private meeting. The executive, a Belgian national named Luc Dubois, arrived in Ouagadougou without the knowledge of his company's board, claiming he wanted to provide information about the full extent of the operations Traoré had partially exposed. Traoré agreed to the meeting, though with extensive security precautions. Dubois could be a genuine whistleblower, or this could be an elaborate trap designed to discredit or harm Burkina Faso's president. The meeting took place in a secure facility, with multiple guards present, and Colonel Zungrana overseeing all security arrangements. "Mr. President," Dubois began, his demeanor suggesting genuine distress, "what you exposed in your press conference is only a fraction of what's been happening. I've worked in the mining industry for 30 years, and I've watched it become increasingly militarized, increasingly willing to use any means necessary to maintain control over African resources. I can't be part of it anymore." "Why the change of heart?" Traoré asked, his tone neutral but his attention fully focused. "Because I have children, and they asked me what I do for a living, and I realized I couldn't honestly tell them. I couldn't say I'm part of a system that deliberately keeps African nations poor while extracting their wealth. When your press conference happened, when I saw the evidence you presented, I knew I had to make a choice, continue being complicit or try to do something to help expose the full truth." Over the next 3 hours, Dubois provided a comprehensive briefing on the mining industry's coordinated efforts to resist African resource nationalism. He described how companies shared intelligence about nationalization risks, how they coordinated their responses to government actions, how they used their connections to European and American governments to apply diplomatic and economic pressure. He provided documents, communications records, and internal company reports that demonstrated a systematic approach to maintaining Western control over African minerals. The diamond theft operation, that was actually relatively unsophisticated compared to some of what they've done, Dubois explained. In other countries, they've funded opposition parties, supported coup attempts, even arranged assassinations of leaders who were too successful at mobilizing their populations behind resource nationalism. Your name is on a risk assessment list, Mr. President. They consider you one of the most dangerous African leaders because of your success at nationalizing mines and your ability to inspire other nations to follow your example. Traoré listened carefully, neither fully trusting Dubois nor dismissing his information. Everything would need to be verified, cross-checked against other intelligence sources. But if Dubois was telling the truth, it confirmed what Traoré had long suspected, that the resistance to African sovereignty was coordinated, sophisticated, and willing to use extreme measures. "What do you want in exchange for this information?" Traoré asked. "Protection," Dubois said bluntly. "Once my company realizes I've defected, they'll come after me legally, financially, possibly physically. I need asylum, a new identity, security for my family. In exchange, I'll testify before international bodies, provide evidence for prosecutions, do whatever is necessary to help expose this system. It was a significant request, but the information Dubois was offering was potentially invaluable. Traoré agreed to provide protection while his security services verified the intelligence Dubois had brought. If it checked out, Burkina Faso would grant asylum and coordinate with international human rights organizations to ensure Dubois' testimony reached the widest possible audience. You realize, Traoré told Dubois as the meeting concluded, that what you're doing is dangerous not just for you but for everyone connected to you. These companies have enormous resources and few scruples about using them. If you go forward with this, there's no turning back. I understand, Mr. President, but I've been turning a blind eye for too long. If African nations are willing to fight for their sovereignty, the least I can do is help expose the systems that have been fighting against that sovereignty for decades.